Good evening. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Round Lake Area School District Board of Education on August 21st, 2023 at 7:26 p.m. If I can get started first with a roll call, please.
Mrs. McGinley?
Here.
Mr. Francisco?
Here.
Mrs. Larson?
Here.
Mr. DeVera?
Here.
Mr. Jewett?
Here.
Mrs. Klingler?
Here.
Miss Lee?
Here.
All right, and first up is our Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, need a motion for approval of the meeting agenda. One quick addendum to that, just as a update. We are removing closed session, so we will not have closed session tonight. So we are going to be removing 14. But with that amended, I need a motion to approve the amended meeting agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Mrs. Klingler. Roll call, please.
Mr. DeVera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Absolutely.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
All right, we have an approved agenda, and first up on that is communications to the board, and the first for that is the staff experience and climate survey executive summary.
So, Ms. Bennett and I are going to co-present this this evening. We've been very eager to share the results with you. Just a little bit of backstory. If you remember, I asked for board approval to work with Hanover Research, which is a national consulting firm. They have an army of statistics individuals. They have qualitative researchers, statisticians, psychometricians. I mean, they have everything that you could imagine. I think for us, as we started thinking about prior to the pandemic, I've always viewed Round Lake as a destination district. We're very large. We're fiscally healthy. We have a very high functioning school board. We have an amazingly supportive community. We have a good working relationship. We've had labor peace for like a really long time. But even prior to the pandemic, I think nationally some of the trends were a little bit concerning with educators, just with burnout, attrition. I actually did my doctorate, I think I got it in 2008, and even then there started to be like some signs that the profession was in trouble. And I actually did my research on induction and retention. And even then, half the people leaving the profession didn't leave it because they weren't compensated. It was they weren't supported. So we go into the pandemic. I think we all remember what that was like. That was very, very, very hard on everybody. I'm glad that we're past it and we're back to some level of normalcy. But frankly, I think one of the things that I wanted was to just get input from the staff, to really dig in to see how they're feeling. We had, prior to this survey, we have structures for communicating with staff. We have principals that meet with team leads. We have regular meetings with the association. Every building in the district has meetings with the association, with their building reps. The union meets with every single department twice a month. But frankly, we just wanted to ask on a broader level and really with the spirit of trying to be better. What can we do? How can we listen? And frankly, with 1,000 employees, we're a very, very big operation. So we engaged Hanover. Again, we worked with them to develop the survey. They had a standard set of questions, but then we reviewed it, our team, to kind of, I don't think we changed a whole lot of the questions. I mean, there was, they're the ones that know what to ask, how to ask it, etc. So The presentation this evening is really an executive summary. We've included a backup document for your review. You will see the data aligns from one document to the other. The reason we did that is we want to be transparent with the results. Earlier, I think, or late last week, we sent out the executive summary to the staff. And this evening, we'll go through some of the research, how the survey was constructed, some of the feedback, what next steps are, and at some point later on in the year, we'll be following up with you again. I know I've actually talked to every single board member about the survey, and the one thing I'm really proud of, and I'll reference that in a little bit, I don't really know a lot of school districts that engage in a survey like this. It's my 29th year. I've never been a part of something like this on this scale. So, background, we're going to give you a little, I just gave you the background. We're going to review some of the current research nationally on what's happening in schools, which is very current. We're going to tell you a little bit about the survey, give you some executive summary, and then next steps. So as I've stated before, our staff is the biggest resource we have. I think Pam has the exact number, but I think 76.2, or how close am I?
Very close.
76.2% of our budget is spent on staff. So we don't produce widgets, we don't make things, we educate. So we're a staff heavy industry, which is consistent with what's going on nationally. We haven't really done this before. I haven't ever seen anything like this in any of the districts I've ever worked in. I've kind of referenced we're seeing an issue with staff retention and attrition. And frankly, I think getting feedback, I always say if you're not going to follow up on the feedback, then don't ask the questions, because that gets people pretty upset. So being very transparent with what our intentions are. Again, the whole purpose of this is to identify the things that we do well, what are the things we need to work on, which can help us focus our resources and time to make things better, because we want to keep good people. So I'm not going to read all the research. You have this in front of you, but I pulled a bunch of research out of multiple in multiple areas from respected places. You're going to see the Gallup poll. You're going to see McKinsey is an educational research website. It's debatable how good the Wall Street Journal is, but I guess, that's another source. But you're going to see the different sources align with kind of what's happening. Ms. Larson, you work in schools. You kind of see this in your district as well. But, right now, half of our teachers are feeling burned out at work very often, as per the Gallup poll. NEA finds the same thing. They're actually higher than half people are feeling burned out. I've also cited some research from the Teacher Wellbeing Index, again, that supports that people are feeling burned out. And, we know mental health is an issue, and it not only with our kids, but also staff. But teachers, 60% as per Education Week, experience job-related stress frequently or always. Since the start of the pandemic, we've had roughly 300,000 educators publicly leave the profession. That's not that long ago. That's like a big number. You have teachers leaving before they're ready, either to retire. We saw that here when the pandemic hit. We had people retiring earlier than we had anticipated, but we're also finding people who are leaving for other industries for a variety of reasons. We all know that hiring is a challenge. 60% of administrators, as per McKinsey, find it difficult to hire personnel. I mean, we deal with that every year. For us, because you've done a great job as a board providing very good compensation and benefits, we don't have as big of an issue as some of our neighboring districts. We still face challenges with hard to fill positions like special ed, EL, bilingual, and frankly, some of the content specialties at the high school, like finding a physics teacher is really hard. You get into CTE, that's even harder because a lot of those people you have to hire from private industry. Moving on, additional work. So teachers are feeling, because think about it, it doesn't really matter if we have a staff shortage, we have to do what we have to do. So what does that require? It requires people to do extra or more. sub shortage. Perfect example is teachers at the secondary level teach 5 sections, but quite often we have people teaching a 6 class to sub because we can't fill positions or we have people out. One of the things you're going to hear tonight, and Ms. Bennett will talk more about what next steps are, is the discipline issue. Our teachers report that enforcement of discipline would impact their ability to leave or stay in Round Lake at a significant clip, which is consistent with what you're seeing at some of the national levels. National Center for Education statistics, 80% of schools reported that student behavior has worsened in recent years. And I think as a board, because of some of the meetings in the evenings that you've had to come to, I think we've seen some of that. But some of this just bears out. It's not really on a gut feel. I mean, we're seeing it. And then, frankly, when you have diverse communities, which we view as a strength, younger teachers are tending to leave the profession earlier, or people who are, maybe at the end of their career. So just the reason I put this in here was just to reinforce that it's not just necessarily about us. And frankly, I kind of knew this the last few years because we talk about with other superintendents. I'm on multiple legislative advocacy groups, LUDA, EdRed. You were at the meeting, Mr. Francisco. What did we talk about? Increasing the teacher pool, increasing retention, making, frankly, one of the problems I see is just respect for the profession has waned. I know teachers and educators, especially during COVID, were getting beat up publicly a little bit, and I think that people don't definitely go into teaching for the financial benefit. It's a hard profession, so it's just for us. I just feel like given the amount of time and resources we have with our staff, we might as well ask them how they're feeling so we can really target things for our people in a way that will make it better for them. The last thing, the next 2 things I'll talk about is, and this is a big deal, we had almost 600 responses on this survey. We have 1,000 employees. Statistically speaking, when you're doing a survey like this and you're collecting data, if you get a 33% response rate, that's viewed positively. So we had almost 600 responses. We included the breakdown for you a little bit, and now I'm going to pass it off to Heather to share with you a little bit more about the survey itself and then the results, and then at the end we want to leave time for questions. So I'm going to pass it off to you.
Okay, so when we conducted the survey, Dr. Mendoza referenced having some conversations with Hanover at the start, determining what questions would be involved and how that information would be broken down. So at the top of the slide, we show how the demographic breakdown was placed into the survey. Staff members were asked to answer certain questions: years of experience, level, race, gender, and role. This would allow us, for when we access the dashboard that Hanover Research has created for us, to dig deeper into some of the target areas by demographic breakdown if we choose to do so. For example, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, we met with the full admin team at our Admin Advance earlier this month, and we analyzed this data by school level. So we had it broken down by pre-KK together, grades 1 through 5. The 2 middle schools were combined, and then high school. So we didn't have it broken down by individual school, but it was by level. Response options, you'll see there, one thing I want to note here is I learned something through this process. For our district surveys that we've put out before, I typically remove that middle of the road response option, wanting people to pick a side, basically. Are you happy or you're not, and which direction? Hanover recommends that we include that, but to be careful when you're analyzing that information. So for example, if you have heavy responses in the agree to strongly disagree, but you have a good chunk in the middle, it might be a safe assumption to be thinking that those people that responded with the middle of the road response, that they're leaning toward the positive direction. But it could also go toward the other side as well. So we just need to be careful as we're analyzing that information that we really think through that middle of the road response there. The survey is broken out into 5 different categories or sections. One being overall satisfaction, reasons to stay or leave, working conditions, and school district support, and professional development. And we'll go into each of those in a little bit more detail now. So the first one is overall satisfaction. Some of the questions that were included in the survey in this section included, paper and clicker. So what's their overall satisfaction in their current role? What's their satisfaction level in their specific areas connected to the role that you're in, such as relationships, benefits, workload, school and district climate. Question was asked about satisfaction related to your school, including professional development opportunities, school facilities, asked to rate those, support from leadership, and student behavior and discipline. This was actually covered, the student behavior and discipline was covered in a few of the sections. They were asked if they felt successful in their current role and if they would recommend our district as a place of employment for others, and whether they felt valued in their current position. So up here you'll see some of the strengths and areas for opportunity. I just want to call out a couple. In the top, relationship with colleagues, very high rating, 84%. Felt supported in that area or good about that area. And then what are the areas for relative opportunities, the discipline procedures and enforcement, feeling comfortable in that area, just 24% saying yes that they did.
And just to reaffirm with the board, it's when you give a survey like this, it's not just appropriate to look at the number. We have to dig in and find out why, because it does seem, and this isn't good or bad, some of the responses contradict each other. So for example, it's very clear that our teachers like working with each other. And frankly, that's a large part of what a building's culture is. Do you like working with your colleague? Well, yes. Well, then why is the school climate why doesn't that accord with the degree to which you like working with your colleagues? So we got to dig into it and figure out why. And we kind of saw that theme periodically in the survey.
Okay, the next section was reasons to leave or stay. Questions in this area were, some included, how likely or unlikely are you to leave your position within the next 2 years? If you were to leave, what would the reasons be behind that decision? What factors would encourage you to stay in your position? And then they were asked to rate their comfort level in speaking with various groups within our district. So school administration, district administration, etc. So again, you have some strengths and areas for opportunity listed on this slide. And I'll just call out the first one at the top there, comfort speaking about questions or concerns with colleagues. Again, 83% that comfort level with colleagues is very positive. And then on the bottom section there, areas for opportunity, improve student discipline procedures would encourage your respondents to stay in the district. So again, comments toward that discipline and behavior. Next up is working conditions. Questions in this section, staff were asked to rate facilities. So what is their learning environment like? Is it a supportive learning environment in their classroom? Are the buildings clean and well maintained? And do they feel like it's a safe environment for learning? They were asked if they have sufficient resources and how they felt about managing student conduct. So rating our communication on the rules and expectations related to behavior and discipline. How are we enforcing those rules, and how are they feeling supported by the school district administration and then also families? Some areas to highlight on this slide. At the top, teachers are encouraged to try new things to improve instruction at 74%. We saw that as a very positive response here. And then areas for opportunity, just calling out teachers feeling valued as educational experts. Only 46% were saying they felt positive in that area. The last section is support and professional development. Questions in this section pertain to reading leadership of school administration and district administration, specifically on how well connected they felt that administration was to them and their buildings. Are they attracting, retaining high quality staff? Are they seeking input on decision making? Also with professional development, questions pertain to do they feel like there are opportunities for collaboration when it comes to PD? Do they feel like professional development opportunities are leading to success in their roles? And is it differentiated and targeted to individual needs? Again, just calling out a big positive at the top there, 60% of certified staff feeling like the professional development plans that we have in place here are differentiated and meet individual needs. And then areas for opportunity, probably one of the lowest ratings that we received was input on district decisions, only at 19%.
And if you think about it, look at the last response on the slide deck before, on the slide before, teachers feeling valued as educational experts according with input on district decisions. So if you look at Hanover's executive summary, Heather will cover this, but input on decision making is a thing. And so we have to figure out what the right balance is on that. And I would say that is, I think in the history of education has been a challenge. I'm not downplaying it all. We need to do better, but we have really talented people. We also run a large school system, and we just need to be more balanced with how we do that. The other thing I'll share is on the PD slide, Hanover's never seen, that's the highest rating they've ever seen nationally on satisfaction with professional development. So that's something, I know the number's 60, doesn't seem like it's high, but Hanover said they haven't seen that before. So credit to the teaching and learning department under Liz's leadership that feel like we do a really good job at trying to support our teachers with their learning.
Okay, the next slide goes over the target areas that were identified by Hanover in their executive summary. So those top 3 areas: enhance work-life balance for employees by providing more support and resources, supporting teacher satisfaction and retention by revisiting school discipline procedures, which we saw a lot of in the summary here tonight, optimizing staff experiences by increasing opportunities for staff input that Dr. Mendoza just spoke to. And then the last thing on this slide, I just wanted to speak to the comments. There were opportunities for staff to enter open-ended comments in a couple different areas. I got the list today. There were 380 of them, and we read them all. And we didn't put them into the packet. It's not our intention to open these publicly, but we just wanted to make mention of that to help preserve the anonymous feature of the survey that we did promote to our staff. We don't want to release those, but we can share with you that all of them align directly to what you're seeing in the summary tonight and within the executive summary that's been provided by Hanover. Okay, so last slide here for me is, again, focus areas are listed there at the top, the first 3. I referenced we did some work as a full admin team at the Admin Advance where we dug into, I think it was 90 minutes of analysis of the data by level, talking about how we can respond as a district, generally speaking, that day within the 90 minutes, and what we can do within our schools in those particular areas. And we do intend on including this topic in future admin meetings as we go forward each month. Sharing of results with staff, Dr. Mendoza mentioned we sent out a communication to all of our staff last week Friday, and we have been working alongside our leadership throughout this entire process. So they are well aware of where we are in the process and have been a partner in next step development. One of the areas that seemed like an easy choice because of how much we saw behavior and discipline mentioned throughout the results of the survey, and recognizing that if we can respond to that area of behavior and discipline, we feel it will have a direct impact on some of the other areas that were listed within the recommendations. So we are partnering with Hanover again for a next step. So to analyze this behavior and discipline more deeply. So we are in the process of developing in-depth interviews, and where we are with that right now is we worked alongside, again, Earl leadership, Hanover representatives to develop an interview guide, so how those interviews will take place, what types of questions will be asked. We've provided them with a list of participants. We have a good number at each of the levels that they'll be reaching out to for these 30-minute in-person, through Zoom, but real conversations about the topic. The interviews will be conducted September 11th through the 22nd, and then they'll be delivering an analysis of all of that information back to us in mid-October. So I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of the types of questions that will be asked in those interviews. So how do staff members at Round Lake perceive the disciplinary environment within the district, particularly in terms of enforcement consistency and students' behavioral norms? What factors do staff members believe contribute to students' behavioral issues, and how do they suggest these issues should be addressed? So again, seeking input for solutions. And then what type of support and resources do staff members need to effectively enforce disciplinary procedures, and how do they believe this will improve their work experience and satisfaction? So that's next in the area of discipline. Also, we do intend to respond with an analysis of elementary curriculum needs. That process is just beginning. And then increase in expectations specific to building level interaction and visibility by district administration. I think we've heard already that just within the first week of school, a week plus, that at least our administration is speaking to us being more visible, present, and responsive in our buildings. And we intend to keep that rolling throughout the rest of the school year and hopefully making an even more positive impact on that area of the survey results.
So we're going to bring our intent is to bring at a high level summary back after we do the teacher interviews to follow up with you. And then that will include like action steps. So I just, I view information as I'm grateful that we have it. We've got direct feedbacks from a sizable portion of our staff. And I know many of you work in the corporate environment as school board members. So this kind of thing, I think I've spoken with many of you, is not new, but it doesn't happen usually in school systems, not like this. So I think we always look for improvement opportunities, and I'm very confident we'll be able to address this. I think it is our intent on some level to give the survey again, so we can kind of measure improvement. I can't guarantee it's going to be every single question again. It might be specific questions where we've identified strengths and opportunities, but we want the input, so we're not afraid of it. I think we have a great team. We've got a very, very strong group of principals, and I'm very confident we'll be able to kind of keep improving on a continuous cycle. So I think at this point, we're open to any questions you have or comments.
Questions from the board?
Do you want to go? Okay. You're right. I first want to say that you're right. You don't usually see this in school districts, but coming from the corporate world, you don't see it a lot in company corporations either. And having working for a few Fortune 500 companies, they do it, and then they also, if they did do it, they didn't listen to the feedback. So you put together a great synopsis of what you put the survey on, and hopefully we'll see what you guys do with that information. But a few questions on the survey. So 580 responses back, 584. How many actual surveys went out though?
I checked in with Ms. Gatlin today asking how many union members they have, and she said approximately 950.
Okay. Because then you look at the breakdown by how we have it. It's preschool, kindergarten, elementary, middle school, high school. Preschool and kindergarten next to the district. Is that district personnel when you say district?
Yes.
There? Okay.
Yes.
Those are your lowest return rate.
But I think district union members, those are people like specialists. So they're not technically in classrooms. Who else would be in that group?
Well, I do want to mention the 9% is not the response rate for that group. It's just the percentage of the total response.
Oh, no, I know.
Okay.
But it's only 51 responses, right?
Yeah, and I think what I can do in the weekly is give you the response rate by level. That might be helpful.
Yeah, because it'd be nice to know, okay, and I don't know what the numbers are, but like preschool and kindergarten, bless you. Preschool and kindergarten, again, it's 200, but you got 51 back. So what was that percentage rate of return?
Yeah, so approximately 25%,
Right.
if that's what the numbers
Well,
are.
right,
We'll confirm
but I want to
that.
know what our actual
Sure.
numbers are. Because we need to see if we're going to do this, we need to know where we're not getting the responses from, and how do we get that? Because we want to be able to get the feedback from everybody, and so that everybody's voice is heard, and they, you know, we hear what they have to say. I'm just saying with preschool and kindergarten, I guess, you know, if we could put an asterisk on district, because I don't know who that really encompasses.
We can get that for you. I'm pretty confident I know what it is, but I want to give you accurate information. I think basically all of our specialists are union people. We have 32 of those. So right there, it's 32 out of the 47. And then we have some other ones that I can't. Technicians, yeah, some people that report that are in Dan's department, secretaries, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll break it.
Okay. Yeah. Because I just see district and I think district. Who is district on that? So that's those two questions. And I was just gonna reiterate. I'm glad you didn't put the comments in here. I mean, I wouldn't want you to. We want our staff to be able to put in comments and know that it is anonymous. So, thank you for not doing that.
And just to clarify, I don't think we said this. The percentages you see do not include the middle rating. So it's one way or the other, right? So when you see 70% of overall staff satisfaction in the role, 70% of staff responded, I agree or I strongly agree that I'm satisfied in my role. So we didn't put the middle percentage in there because we wanted to clearly show how the question was slanted one way or the other. If that makes sense, I don't think we shared that.
I think that's really all I had. I'm definitely anxious to see at this continuum of survey and what are the outcomes from it.
I've been part of organizations that have done it well and those that have not done it well. And those that do it well understand that the survey is only one small part. It's all the other pieces after it. So the responses, I actually don't know if on the first survey out of the chute, if how many responses you get. I think that's great. It actually demonstrates a level of trust. Because there's a whole portion of people that didn't take the survey because people have asked questions before, they're not going to do anything with it, and then I've been part of organizations that beat people into responding to the survey, and because it's all about the number of people responding. But the most important thing that we do is respond, which I love that we're seeing it. Report that we responded, report how we respond, and then continue to update to remind people that we're responding to what they said, because they actually forget that you responded. So it is this ongoing, continual communication. I mean, now it's a thing. So not doing the thing actually sends a story as well. So I'd highly encourage that this become a thing that we do on a regular basis, report out, follow up. It's a metric. I'd highly encourage this being a metric that we continue to do, even though nobody else is doing it. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question. So there is a weird fine line with encouraging input in the way that it's responded to, because sometimes there's just things that are suggested that are not possible. When we're doing the interviews, is there like parameters set prior to that, or is it just like an open feedback and then we just kind of take the feedback as it is and then
So the interview is guided by the questions that I referenced tonight, which they fully expect that maybe it goes off in one direction or another, and I think they'll do a good job in kind of honing in on the area that we're wanting to focus on, being behavior and discipline. We recognize that in the end, there might be some things that come back to us from the analysis of those interviews that maybe just by law we're not able to change. For example, when when it relates to discipline or behavior, but maybe things, maybe it's communication. Maybe staff aren't understanding or are not aware of what steps were taken after that situation in the classroom, and assume that something maybe wasn't done. It's just an example. I'm not sure. But those are the types of things that we hope to get from these interviews, so then we'll have some suggestions or recommendations that come back from Hanover again, just as we did in this survey. But so we can then take the next steps in responding. So there might be another level of analysis. So maybe we need to dig deeper into data that we have in district pertaining to a variety of things. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Thank you. I was kind of going down that rabbit hole myself, and then I was wondering, and I might be jumping ahead because you haven't received any of the data yet, but if it is like, for example, communication, like what avenues would they take to like explain, I guess, or further like deepen their knowledge of the process is, if that makes sense.
I think for us, after we get after Hanover conducts the interviews, which is good, it's a third party, it's a safe, we might have to then do it to even get further clarification. So, in the end, it's for us, it's about understanding what does it actually mean, like at the ground level. Like Heather said, when I first started here at the high school, one of the things that I know was true is, and this doesn't seem like a big deal, but Skyward wasn't set up to notify the teachers when a behavior issue, when the disposition had been implemented. So a student goes down, there's a consequence. So what ends up happening is, because if you think about it, high school, middle school, you may not see the student again until the next day. If you don't hear anything, it's easy to tell yourself a story. Nothing happened. They didn't do anything. Those types of things. So, and I'm not saying that's what they're saying. I also, and again, you're part of this, you have been consistent in terms of, as a board, expected behavior. I think I've been consistent, and frankly, we've had 17, last year we had 17 meetings ish where we had to consider alternative placement because of student behavior. Well, that's enforcement. That's more than like the 3 years combined before that. So I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying we need to get more information so we can respond. We don't want to assume we think we know what it means. We really want to know what it means. So it'll be really informative, and we're looking forward to sharing that with you.
Thank you.
Any last questions? Thank you very much. Definitely looking forward to the follow-up on that. And now we will move on to our second communication, which is the updates to the student handbook.
Okay, in your packet, you have a list of recommended changes to the student handbook for 23-24. As I've noted in the memo, we receive proposed updates to our handbook through the Illinois Principals Association. We subscribe to their online model student handbook, and they pull changes from IASB's press. So any changes in law or school code, et cetera, all of those flow through the Illinois Principals Association, and then we make those modifications on our end. Most of the time, these changes are done at a specific time of year. There might be times that there's a mid-year change and we need to make a change to the handbook in the middle of the year, in which case we need to be communicating with our families and staff about what those changes are. I do want to note the timing of this. At the last meeting, we talked about when these changes need to be reviewed and in what way. School board policy talks about a parent teacher advisory committee who's responsible for reviewing changes to the handbook and our discipline code. Going forward, we will be handling this in a little bit of a different way, like the way policy says. Later in the spring, probably March, April, we'll be looking at any changes that have been made throughout this school year that would require a change in the student handbook, pulling together a group of teachers from all levels and also our parents to discuss what those changes are, and then coming back probably in early August, because like this list just came from the IEPA in the end of July, and we've had like a slight change even since that release was made to us. So we will need to follow up with some additional review right before the start of the school year, and then we will communicate those changes out with all of our staff and families. This year, in lieu of pulling teachers right at the start of school, we've reviewed these changes with our union leadership team. And then we're sharing these changes with you this evening. And then we intend on making the changes into the student handbook and sending that communication out to families to address all the areas referenced on this list. Do you have any questions about what's listed here as changes?
No questions what's listed, but in communication to families, it would be nice if the district, with the student handbook, I know, families have a chance to review this when they register, but we don't really give an opportunity outside of registering. Not that we don't, because I know it's on the website, but highlighting to families, hey, here's the handbook throughout the course of the year. I think there should be intervals that we communicate to our families, reminding them, providing them the link directly to the handbook. I know, and I'm guilty of it. You register your student, it says review the handbook, there's a link, you're like, yep, sure, click. I did. I didn't. And I'm sure I'm not the only parent that probably does that. But, beginning of the school year, there's opportunities to remind our families, here's a student handbook, we push it on our social media. Giving them that opportunity, again, they may not, but if we give them opportunities to review and forward that link to them, at least they're not trying to think, I'm not reading this now, I'm trying to register my kid, I just want to be done. They're not going to review it or look at it. And then when we have these type of changes, highlighting what those are to the families. So our plans for that.
Yes. I know we talked a little bit about this last week as well. So yes, and depending on what the changes are, there might be specific points in the year where it applies like a little bit more clearly. So we want to be highlighting that specific area in January if it has something to do with something that's happening in that current time frame.
Yeah, I think it's important that we give our families ample opportunities to review besides just at registration, because I'm sure more than not are like me. Yep, I did, and click.
And a lot of the changes don't even happen until after registration has opened.
So if we do it, at the beginning of the year, maybe around Christmas break, and as we end the school year, I just think there has to be a cadence that we push this to our families.
And Heather, I'm wondering, I think we did this before, we don't have to get in all the detail, but I'm wondering if when we communicate it, we can put like a red line version out there so the parent knows where the change is. Anything that's new is in red or blue text so that they can just see it when you're referring to it. And then at the end of the year, those turn the regular print color, and then we just start over and go through a cycle. Maybe we can talk about that.
I think that's a great idea, because even if we push it out there and those change, if we don't highlight or let the parents know what those changes are, they're going to be like, well, I don't know.
Right. Any additional questions or direction from the board? Thank you very much. All right, next up is some additional IASB training for us on the board. Thank you to our community members who brought up the trauma-informed practices training. Now, just as a clarification, that's actually technically only on the agenda and required for first-year board members. So technically, none of us were required to have it. But I did go ahead and take the training just to see what it was, and it's very good. So the recommendation that I'm going to put out there is that the district goes ahead and puts it all into all of our accounts so that everyone can go ahead and do it. It definitely shines a light on the trauma-based education component and showing us just how to think outside the box, so to speak, when it comes to how do we make decisions. So look for Yanira to be posting that so that you'll see it pop up in your ISB training, and we'll go forward and we'll be able to go forward on that. Any questions in regards to that training?
No, it's great to have it on the agenda just as a topic for discussion for the board.
Is that going to be an online training, an in-house training, or one in Chicago at?
Online. Yeah, it's probably 45 minutes at tops. Nope, completely separate from the ALIS stuff. This is more just educational about having the component of learning and understanding where our community members, our students, may be having trauma in their lives and how to be able to serve them through that trauma.
And also that some student behaviors
Precisely.
relate to their past trauma.
That, yes, exactly. 100%. Thank you. All right, we will now move on to our summer programming recap.
All right, I'm here for a little bit of celebration. I just wanted to do a quick recap of the 13 different programs that we offered throughout the community and in our schools during this past summer. So the cool thing about kind of our goal here was really to think outside the box and not think about just in school what it should look like, but think about the weather's nice. We sometimes don't have these opportunities in the wintertime. Plus we're all in school. So what could we do to be different in the summertime? And then also what are some things that are just practice that are good to continue in schools? So our first program that we offered was connecting our kids to reading. This program really was out in the community in partnership with the Round Lake Area Library, where we did have 131 students participate. But then we also have a reading online program for our 2nd through 5th graders that we are this year looking to extend into kindergarten and 1st grade as well. But we have that on students' iPads this past summer for 2nd through 5th grade. So 25 students participated in that. And we had different prizes for our students that participated in those programs. So then we moved into, there were a couple of different programs that were offered within the same locations in the community. And one of those was our Math Trails program. And this particular program, we really looked at the different domains in the math standards and then did some fun outside activities to connect those domains. So in the pictures that you have here, you see the building a number line, nature sorting, and those two particular activities are specific to numeracy. And then looking at making shapes and the Simon Says Math, those were connected to the geometry domain. Then this was a fun activity that really brought the whole community piece together. If you're looking to go to the farmer's market, obviously you can go get some fresh fruits and vegetables, but there were also activities there for the kids. If they wanted to drop the kids off for a quick sec while you went and checked out the strawberries, you had the opportunity to get them activities, variety of things from estimation challenge, building the tallest tower, creating patterns, and even completing scavenger hunts. And there are still 2 dates left on the calendar, September 2nd and September 16th, and we will continue to have staff there for our kids to engage within the community. So then we move on to our fun rolling summer buses. These, as you all know, we started with an art bus last summer. This summer we added a science bus. These were offered on Tuesdays and Thursdays throughout June and July.
The activities were really designed around elementary age students. However, we had numerous middle school and high school students that volunteered to help facilitate and lead some of the various different activities with the kids. So it was cool to see older kids working with younger kids throughout the different activities. So our first bus was the summer art bus. On the pictures that we have here, you see a variety of different painting strategies with relief painting, pour painting, and then fun salad spinner painting. That one just sounds kind of fun. And then creating, over on the right-hand side of the slide there, was just creating like 3 monsters with a variety of different resources. And then our next bus, our new bus this past summer, was our science bus. This particular activity, we encouraged the kids to see science all around them. Kids engaged in a variety of hands-on activities themed around specific science topics. It was pretty cool. We had a lot of repeat customers, and a particular mom that had pulled, I know it was Jess, our science coordinator, aside to just say like how much her kids loved going to the activities, and then we're begging her to then drag them to the library to learn more. So, you know, that's a definite plus in the summertime that kids are pushing to learn more. And our next activity that was new this year was our summer theater program. This one we really dedicated to a whole district-wide look and offered this to all incoming first graders, so any kids that have been with us at Pleviac, all the way through our students that were going into their senior year. You can see that we had 28 people or students involved, whether they were cast or crew. It was a total of 4 hours every day, 4 days a week, and they put together a show in 3.5 weeks. So that is right there. That's impressive. But it was just a fun activity for our kids that love theater and maybe kids that hadn't tried it yet. So a cool new addition to programming. Another thing that we tried out is we had started during COVID Twilight tutoring during the school year. In this past school year, we really opened up Twilight tutoring. Our first run at it, it was pretty specific hours. And last year we just kind of said any day after school, any weekend, and we let the teachers pick their schedules. So we decided this past summer to see what it could look like extending this into the summer. We did stick to students, or not students, but staff that had already established relationships with parents. We wanted to make sure that there was like the teacher knew the student and knew where to continue the support into the summer. So we had 9 tutors that continued into the summer, which was a total of 37 students with over 200 hours of tutoring throughout the summer. Just a little tidbit on summer tutoring, which during the school year is Twilight tutoring. We are continuing Twilight tutoring this school year. We're going to open it up the first week of September after Labor Day. And just some fun, pretty cool statistics. Last year we had 29 teachers support our Twilight tutoring across all 8 grade levels. There were 3,610 tutoring sessions last school year with over 450 students getting support. So that is a program that is currently funded through ESSER, but something that we think certainly might be something that we look to looking at district dollars as we move forward. We find it's been pretty successful and helpful for families and students. So then we move into our building-based programming. We did continue to run our kindergarten countdown camp that has been sponsored by the United Way, and that program continued this past summer. We had 2 classrooms of 14 to 15 students in each room. This program, again, like I said, the United Way really does all of the what would you call the preparation, all the planning. We push out the information, but they do a lot of the recruiting themselves, and they're really looking for students that have not engaged in any form of formal schooling prior to kindergarten. So any preschool experience, they're looking for students that have had no exposure to school. So the great thing about United Way here is they do pay for the salary for a teacher and a teacher's assistant in each classroom, and then we pick up the cost of the benefits that we pay through Title I. Then we move on to our building-based middle school program. This one was brand new 6th and 7th grade. The year before we only did it in 8th grade. This was a pretty huge curricular lift here. Just to give you a quick brief history, middle school summer school programming was, for sure when I was at McGee, based on the idea that if students were failing 2 or more of their core classes, they were required to attend summer school. But our curriculum and programming had always been focused on reading, really language arts and math. So no matter which 2 core classes they failed, they had to sit in reading and math. For a lot of reasons, we wanted to get away from looking at just reading and math because you could have some kids that were failing science and social studies. So we took really an integrated look at summer school, and it's also super important to note I can picture many faces from my 5 years at McGee that fit into this program, and they are not kids that typically love school. So we had to really think about how do we re-engage these kids in learning and think outside the box. So we focused on a curriculum that really looked at like a real world question. You can see in the presentation what those questions looked at. And then we dove into creating kind of like a problem-based learning project around that. Really was pretty science focused, but of course there's plenty of reading, there's plenty of data analysis and numeracy involved in science. So there was definitely a connection to a lot of content areas there. The 6th grade students, their area of focus was exploring volcanoes. 7th graders were looking at studying the Amazon rainforest. And then our 8th grade students got to build their own island society. So it was a problem. They looked at it, they built one whole project that culminated to the end. And I'd like to point out that I popped by a couple of those, actually a lot of those classrooms throughout the summer to just kind of talk to the teachers because it was new. And they were like, they loved it. They were like, this is so great. Like, it's so fun. And when your teachers are engaged and having fun, it makes it, especially in the summertime, it makes a huge difference for the kids. So we're pretty excited about where that program is at. We're going to look at like, how do we potentially open that up to more kids and just consider options there, because that was a really fun project that I think was impactful for kids and staff. So our next program in our buildings is a K-12 program that offers support for our students that are new to the United States, new to Round Lake. And our elementary and middle school programs are fairly similar in that they look to create thematic units that help the students connect really to the 3 purpose there that you see on the screen, continuing to develop their English language skills. Because we do have dual language in our elementary schools, of course, there is some Spanish development as well that continues at elementary, but it offers that opportunity for practicing academic vocabulary and then just exposing them to topics that'll help them integrate into what it's like to be in the United States, specifically in a school environment in the United States. Once we move into the high school, the focus becomes more on English as a second language and credit recovery. Potentially, there are some newcomer students that, depending on what time of year they came or just the challenges they face, that did not earn credit. So they are offered a credit recovery option. But there are some kids that are newcomers that honestly just come because they know they got more to learn and they like figuring out and being in school. So we don't say no if they didn't fail. Like, we want to welcome them as well, an opportunity to just acquire more language. So high school just opens up their structures a little bit different. So moving then from language learners into our special education programming, this program is called, you would hear the acronym because we love those in education, ESY, which stands for Extended School Year. And this particular special education program does require eligibility through a student's IEP. And that eligibility looks at if the student, if there's a student need because of possible regression or lack of recoupment from that time when they're not in school in the summer. So we were able to provide services for 48 students in our ESY program, and 30 of those students were early childhood through elementary, and 18 of those students were middle school and high school. I also popped by a couple of these classrooms at the secondary level. It was really fun to see when I popped by the middle school and high school students, they had combined their classrooms to do some science experiments together. So it was fun to see just a group and doing a lot of hands-on learning in the summer. So we have 2 more programs that take place here on our high school campus. Our high school summer program focuses on credit recovery, and there were 176 students that registered for our high school credit recovery program, and there was a total of 55.5 credits earned. As Kurt mentioned, actually it might have come up at finance, so he had referenced our initial primary, provisional numbers coming out for high school graduation. That is looking like it is going to be higher than we've seen historically. So I think that is kudos to the opportunity that kids have to recover some credit in the summer. But it's also super important to note that we don't only offer credit recovery in the summer, it's also offered throughout the school year. So this is just one opportunity for kids in recovering any credit they may need to recover.
And Dr. Steffen, can you clarify how are we defining a credit for the board?
Yes, so you'll see when you look at the credits earned there, it came out to 55.5 because when the students initially register for a course in the summer credit recovery, they register for a semester because every semester you earn 0.5 credits. So it's like a half of a course. So, and there are kids definitely that may have passed like English 1 first semester, but not second semester. So then they can jump right into that second semester course. They don't have to repeat the entire year. So 0.5 is considered a semester credit. Okay. And then our last program in out in our schools here again is on this campus at our Round Lake Transition Center. Many of you may have seen the cool greenhouse that has been added to that property. So their particular program focused on planting, flower design, harvesting, and cooking. They designed to help the students undertake and look into like nutritional value of food and then cost savings of growing your own food. And then the students were able to make recipes using their own vegetables that they grew. So as far as next steps in our summer programming, we definitely need to evaluate the participation in each of the programs to just look at sustainability, which also I briefly mentioned speaks to funding. Some, certainly not all, of our summer programs were funded through ESSER. So we will have to do a full review of kind of looking at what we can sustain, what we potentially cannot because of funding. But we'll take a solid look at that and for sure bring things back to the board in that concern. We also want to look at reviewing the program for feedback. I spoke to how we made changes in the middle school program based on feedback from kids, families, and just staff ourselves, knowing that we needed to be doing better in programs. So we'll work on going through that. And then we also want to continue to consider other types of courses or maybe different types of delivery models to increase participation and opportunities. A good example of that is at the high school this year. Just coming out of COVID, it's become extremely clear how important relationships are for kids with adults. So we did not do a remote option this year in our credit recovery because we had too many kids historically that would sign up and then just kind of disappear. So the high school and I talked about it and we thought, you know what, let's just get them in person. Let's get them here, make sure we're supporting them. We still had a lot of credits recovered. But we talked about, could there be a blended option where if a student comes Monday, Tuesday and they're progressing, go do your work at home Wednesday, Thursday, or something along those lines, because we just want to be open to opportunities and a lot of our kids need to work. So we don't want to be too limiting, but we don't want to, take away that adult connection, just to support kids through the process. So that last thing I don't have as a bullet point that I just think is incredibly important to note is summer programming this year. It was something I oversaw, but the amount of collaboration between our building administrators and the teaching and learning people over here, the tech department, transportation, HR, I hope I don't leave anyone out. I think that covers it, which is great. Like we worked really well together. We came up with a lot of new creative programming, and we shared a lot of the load. So it was fun to just dive into some new opportunities and see people working together. So, any questions?
I have one. These are great programs, and I did hear a lot of positive feedback in the community. But what means did we use to communicate these opportunities to the community?
That's a great question. That's one of our opportunities for improvement. We talked about that, especially our art bus, science bus, math trails, STEAM tables, maybe Katie, but those three, we were like looking through our website. I know they got pushed through social media. I follow our stuff. I saw them all the time. But I don't feel that we met what we would want to do. So we want to look at that in partnership with Sarah LeBlanc's team and see what more can we do. One thing we've talked about, because parents did say sometimes it got confusing because we were trying to be in the Heights, in the beach, in the park, and be everywhere. But then sometimes they were like chasing, where's the bus? So we've thought about, do we just say the science bus is always the library parking lot? So that's another thing. But yes, that definitely, we've heard feedback that sometime, like for whatever reason, Village School was not very highly attended. We don't know why. There's a whole neighborhood there. People could walk to it, but somehow that one got missed. So we're looking, if you have any particular feedback, we're looking for how to get it out even more.
I saw a lot on social media about the science bus and the theater and the art bus, but we have families that might not be on social media, so I was just wondering what other means of communication were we utilizing or could we use in the future?
For sure. I know at the end of the school year, we had a whole, what do I call it, like a catalog, like think Park District catalog, that in partnership with Heather at the time, her team got pushed out through principals, but it was really close to the end of the year. So then thinking about how can we continue to have principals push those out in June and July, I think is something we should for sure be considering.
Is it something we could add where families could register through Blackboard or something like that? So it would help knowing what numbers you have so that you can prepare for those buses as well.
We did do that for the buses using Calendly. So we had a kind of a max capacity at each of those locations and events. So they were asked to kind of reserve a spot.
Okay.
The kindergarten countdown camp with United Way. So with the Mountaintop project, the intent is to provide some sort of pre-K work. And so I'm just curious about the gap, right? I'm curious about, there's the Mountaintop project and there's United Way for a family getting some exposure prior to, getting on deck, right? Prior to kindergarten. Do we know how many students participate in this? And then do we know how much the gap is? Yeah, the gap is bigger than what we have there, unfortunately. So in working with Sarah Swanson, we've talked just about how do we recruit more. It's hard because they're not kids that are in our programming. This number this year was smaller. We have historically run up to 4 classrooms with United Way, and this year we only got to 2. I've talked to Sarah. She's like, we did everything the same way. So we got to start thinking more outside the box on how to get that word out more. Like I've said, United Way organizes it all and does the recruiting, but that they don't care what we do. So if we come up with more ways of pushing it out and getting into the community, they'll definitely get behind it because they want more kids as well. The tricky part is figuring out who are the kids. So we'll keep looking for sure.
Do we ever partner with like local daycares at all? Have we ever like considered that? I don't even know if that's like an option. I just was curious.
I don't know if anyone on my team has ever had that experience, but I have not ever partnered with them. Again, the United Way is looking for students that aren't
in preschool programs, so they probably aren't going to go to our daycares because they're offering preschools through that. So we're really looking for the kids that are in an in-home daycare or they're home with a parent or family member and haven't had any exposure to school. That doesn't mean we couldn't think bigger as a district, but as far as what United Way will provide, that's their like who they're looking for.
So we definitely partner with Head Start. So often we'll have students attend the EEC in the AM and then attend Head Start in the PM or vice versa.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is a big deal for me. So if we know that there is the mountaintop project is only so big and that there's a market, right? If there's a market that's connected to there that doesn't get served, that may be an alternative, almost like batch of potential people to reach out to as well.
Okay, for sure. I can work with Eric and Jane to look into how we can make some connections there to try. It's definitely something Sarah Swanson was kind of picking her brain all summer. Like, I don't know what happened this year was different than last year and just less. I mean, the class sizes were smaller when we had 4. I think we had class sizes of like 11 and this time we were 14, 15, but still there were less students. So like, we need to dig into that and get more.
Any last follow-up questions? Thank you for the detail on that one. And next up, we will move to old marching band uniforms.
Good evening. We are here to discuss the disposal and possible purchasing by community members of our old marching band uniforms. Per board policy, we need to notify the board that we are no longer using these items for educational purposes. And our goal right now is to use them as a fundraising experience or activity for our marching band. In 2020, the board approved the purchase of new marching band uniforms for the program. We ordered them, I think we ordered them right before we went out for COVID. And in 2021, we got them all and we were able to debut them, which was very exciting. At that time, we had talked about possibly using them as a fundraiser where we would send the uniforms out, make pillows or blankets or things. After digging a little deeper into that, we realized it was not a cost-effective measure to mail them out, have them repurposed, ship them back to us, and then do that. So we decided, and we were looking at just selling uniforms to alum or community members who might be interested in having them as a memento for their time in the Round Lake Marching Panthers. The money raised would go back into the marching band activity account to be used for items pertaining to that activity, like set pieces or music or other items that they can use in the program to help benefit the students. And after doing some research on current trends for the cost for uniforms and items and the depreciation value of how, these are older uniforms, they had been worn many, many times and used, we had come up with like a whole uniform for $125, the jacket for $65, the pants for $40, and a hat for $35.
Questions from the board?
So I have a few questions. What will you do with the ones that you can't sell? I'm assuming you're not going to sell full uniforms.
Then they would probably be disposed.
So donation, so we would see those remaining balances come back to the board for full disposal, like Kurt's on the other agenda item.
Yes, sorry, I was confused. Yes, they would be on the disposal list.
Okay. Just to confirm, the marching band activity account, that's strictly for the purchase of equipment for marching band.
Correct.
So marching band only, just emphasizing that.
Correct.
So I know, because I saw some perplexed looks, because we saw these for sale before this came to the board.
That was a miscommunication on our part. We thought they had been on the disposal list last year, and that was a miscommunication part on our part.
Last year.
Yeah, so these were, the way I, just a little context, the way I do the disposal list is I have a running list with a different page for every month for people to add to. There was a point at which these were meant to be disposed of last year. They happened to put those on the list after I had grabbed the list for upload. So moving forward, I'm gonna work with principals to identify a way to identify you missed the deadline, you gotta go to the next month. So these went, I believe, last,
We thought it was it's actually a year ago, the September 19th, I believe it was, meeting, but it wasn't there.
Can I clarify, last year or last board meeting?
Last year.
Okay, just checking. All right, because it was for sale this past
Correct.
couple weeks ago.
It was September of 2022.
So there's been a whole year in lapse of this communication?
yeah, once I pull from that month, I don't go back to that month. So these were meant to go to disposal. They were just sitting in storage waiting they were exploring ideas as to how to maybe capitalize on that before they actually were thrown out. So that's why we ended up where we are today.
Okay.
But let me ask a follow-up question on that then. Had it come through and been updated in September 20, they would have been disposed of, not sold because your list handles just basically disposing of it, not recouping costs.
Yeah, we're gonna look at, because this is the second time we've done something like that. So if you recall, last year we sold some chairs from McGee. So moving forward, I'll be adding an indicator on the spreadsheet for people to identify if these are going to attempt to be sold for some sort of, fundraiser, and then that would be reported to the board as we bring those items forward, if that makes sense.
I know
We're looking for feedback basically, because dispose means a variety of things. We don't want to sell anything unless you're comfortable as a board. So we can do it two ways. One, we can put some type of asterisk on the disposal list that we would bring forward. We would call it out for input and feedback during the meeting, or we can bring it as a separate item to see if you're comfortable with allowing us to sell. If you are, then it would go on, any of the items not sold would go on the disposal list. So we really talked about this. We can do it any way you want us to do it.
Remind me how technology handles, because I know, Dan, you have the entire recovery component where we sometimes can sell back and get funding out of that. So to me, this feels closer to what you have for that.
So we reach out to our recycling partners and give them a list, and they give us market value of anything that's actually worth money in the current market conditions. Those things that have value, we then sell. Those things that don't, we recycle as obsolete.
There's a little bit of a slight difference in the sense that these are more sentimental in nature and it's more community facing. I think some of the things that Dan sells back, are pennies on the dollar. And I think, the chairs, which had the logo at, I think, McGee, and then this is a little bit, it's kind of the same, but it's also different in that there's sentimental value attached. We're just looking for direction as to how you'd want us to handle it.
I would agree. There is a difference between the assets of electronics versus the asset of uniforms, some chairs or other assets of the district. However, we obviously need to have a process and procedure, because that's why I asked last year, because a whole year has transpired before this was caught, that there's been no communication here. That's a long time. I just don't understand how that happens. So there needs to be a clear delineation of how this works. So I would like to see what that's gonna look like. And there should be one of disposal of material. And then if you're gonna take assets of the district and you're gonna sell it to the community, those should be separate memos that come to the board. That's how I think.
I would agree. That's where I was going with that. Was not that those sentimental items follow exactly, but we get a separate report on the things that we get back for funding from the technology side. So, to your point, absolutely, this would be a separate list of we're planning on using these for this purpose.
I don't think and I'm not mean to speak for the board, I don't think we're against selling those items like we did the chairs or the band uniforms. What is surprising is when we're at a community event and we're like, do you remember this? Do you remember this? No, I don't. And it's been a whole year. That is unacceptable.
Chrissy, can I just ask, I haven't talked to you about this specifically, but if the reason it happened a full year is you just decided to act on what you thought had happened, you had approval for last year, is that correct?
Correct.
So it
And
kind
we
of
had
just, you thought it was approved and just hadn't decided when or how. I'm not justifying it, I'm just saying, if you had decided to sell them a month after you thought Kurt had it approved, this would have happened then. Is that
Correct. Plus, during that year, we were taking the time to do more research about what we were going to do with them, about the fundraising opportunities that there were there. And then we found out it was going to not be cost effective to do our original plan.
Just to be clear then, I just want to make sure anything I need direction. I just want to make sure we do this properly. We'll bring back a written procedure for you to look at, but anything that we're planning on selling to put back into, I guess my question, Dan, this will help. With the money the district gets back from assets like old technology, where does that go?
It goes into the district funds.
Yeah, but not necessarily the tech budget.
That's correct.
So this is different even in that regard. This money's going back in the student activity account, which it should, to give back to this very same program from which the funds were derived.
Well, I think that point of where the monies will go can be part of your request.
Yeah, for sure.
So I don't think even which I definitely want to see a procedure on how this is gonna work. I don't think it has to put that in there.
Okay.
It can be part of the request, but there has to be a procedure for this.
Right, and to that point, again, going not to beat the dead horse, so to speak, but unless I missed it, I'm not sure that we had gotten any briefings on the pillow process or any of that. So even once it was theoretically missed and approved by Kurt, we still never heard anything about what those plans were.
I had discussed it before at meetings, and I have an email.
I remember. I do remember that.
Then
So
I missed that one, sorry,
I
thank
will-
you.
I will confirm you did that, but however, this was not. Again, the board does not like showing up to events and like, did we miss a memo? You know, I hate saying that. But we did. Process. These are assets of the district. I want to give them back to the community, but there has to be a process.
Okay.
Dr. Mendoza, Dr. Rowland, do you guys have the general gist of
Yeah,
what you
just,
need?
I think the understanding is if we're going to sell items before it gets to the disposal list, it will come to you as a separate standalone item to get input and feedback on idea, the cost, where money's gonna be deposited. And then if we get approval on that, if there are any, we'll also include it in the procedure. If there's any remaining items, we can put them on the disposal list. Yeah, we'll bring it back for the full board to review.
And, yeah.
I think I'm clear.
Perfect. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is budget assumptions. Board, just as a reminder, last month, we brought budget assumptions to your attention. This month, we have a few additional additions that I'd like to call out to your attention. The first item in the memo shares fund balances from fiscal 19 through fiscal 22. Our auditors are on site this week and next, so we will have fiscal 23 audited comprehensive annual financial statements in December, January, once that's officially approved by the Board of Education. Didn't want you to think that that was an oversight. So as we look at budget assumption highlights, I'd like to bring your attention to line 2. We have received our confirmed fiscal 24 evidence-based funding information. That number has been reflected again on line 2, and that number confirmed is $3,161,453. That is a lower amount than was in last month's, which was reflective of a flat structure of what we received in fiscal 23. So in fiscal 23, our number was closer to $3.5 million. That number has been decreased slightly to $3,161,453. Also, I'd like to bring to your attention line 4, which is the Lake County prior year's tax revenue. We received communication directly from the treasurer's office that they had been auditing their accounts and found that there was dollars due back to local school districts for 2 purposes. One was for items that were sold at auction. Those are called Green Book properties. And then the second item was delayed taxes that were received. So in auditing their books, they found that there was $141,144 due back to Round Lake School District. Would also like to bring to your attention that the treasurer's office at the county is on a different financial fiscal schedule than we are. Our fiscal schedule is July 1 to June 30th. The county reflects more of a calendar year, which is December 1st through November 30th. So we're working closely with our auditors who are on site this week to determine where we will book those funds, because based on when those dollars came in, could be fiscal 20 for us when really the county received it in fiscal 19. So we will make sure that that is accurately reported. Also in line 8, investment income, the prior month's budget assumptions reflected $1 million. Due to the support of the board and certainly the recommendation of the Finance Committee, and the market is really in our favor on that area, I'm recommending an adjustment to $1,500,000 for that investment income. Then also as we transition further down, line 53 reflects an item that was approved at the prior month's board meeting. That was 1.0 middle school assistant coaches, as well as 1.0 high school assistant coach and a 3.0 middle school assistant coaches. That was approved at our prior board meeting. And with that information, we do have a current positive budget assumption balance with a confirmed EBF dollar amount of $1,875,194. Also, there are times within our cadence that items are reported on the budget assumption document, but they're going to be approved at perhaps a future meeting or at the same meeting. So this evening, you have on your approval middle school club sponsors in the amount of $3,962.46. That is not reflected on this document due to upload timelines and dates that didn't make it to this document, but will certainly be recommended that we will update that on the next budget assumption. And then also for future, if that cadence will work, we will look, and I think I've posted it before, pending Board of Education approval. We don't want to assume or certainly misunderstand our position here, but we will document as much as we can to keep you with current information.
Yeah, and I did have Ms. Cacciatore bring that forward because we it's student clubs, and I did speak with Ms. Negretti McGinley about this, and the finance is if we wait for the next meeting, we run the risk of losing interest in the club. So that one, it was after the upload deadline. Chrissy met every requirement we asked her to, but she didn't have that the week prior. So I just want to be clear that that wasn't like a deadline issue. She brought it to me and said, "Do you want to wait till the next meeting?" I said, "No, let's get it onto this one." The Finance Committee also recommended, as just a standard rule, which you'll see, I just want to make sure the full board's in agreement. We've done it both ways. We've included items. We don't want to be presumptuous. I want to be very clear. We don't assume anything. But if we have an item that we're going to bring forward, we'll put it on the budget assumption document as pending board approval so you can see the most recent impact on the budget. I didn't know, Ms. McGinley and Mr. DeVera, if you wanted to comment on that.
Again, it's just to see the full impact of those expenditures. Again, they will be asterisk highlighted, notated that it is pending board approval. But it helps as we look at our, expenditures, as we're especially looking into a new fiscal year, to see them. Yes, I could subtract them, but it's nice to see the full picture.
Any additional questions? Thank you as always for a clear and concise recap there. All right, next up is the strategic plan monitoring document review. Again, always thank you for that. And any questions from the board to the administration in regards to it?
And Heather, just to be clear, that we're just looking for the board's guidance as in this, again, we're in the last year of our 4th year. We plan on using the same tool. We just want to make sure you're comfortable with it.
Yeah, color codes are beautiful for me, so.
So you'll see next month there'll be content added. So that's, I guess, the point, is assuming you're okay with it.
Thank you. All right, next up is disposal of materials recap. Any questions for Dr. Rowling on what he's throwing away this month?
I was gonna say, most of this stuff is from Beach. I'm assuming it's from the, redoing that library that I'm kind of going through and taking inventory.
Yeah, they did a significant look at their collection and reduced quite a few very dated titles in that process.
Just wanted to make sure it wasn't necessarily disposal because the footprint's a little smaller for them in the library with the addition of those classrooms. Isn't it not a little smaller?
It is a little smaller, but I believe they're still able to hold a very suitable collection. I think I know a lot of these books were just very, very dated, that we'd never done a significant look at all of them.
I assume, but I just wanted to ask.
Hearing no additional questions, thank you very much. All right, next up is the FOIA report. Any questions from the board in regards to the FOIA request this cycle? Hearing none. Next up is review contracts under 1,000. We did have the one there. Any questions in regards to that?
There was just Hispanic Heritage already.
It's amazing how fast time flies, huh? All right, hearing no additional questions on contracts under 1,000, we will move on to public comment. Members of the public may participate in public comment during regular board meetings by attending in person or by submitting electronic public comment form. Please note speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Electronic public comments are accepted up until noon on the day of the regularly scheduled meeting. Public commenter will be contacted to confirm identity. Once confirmed, to contact the public comment will be provided to all board members in written form. We did not have any electronic public comment this cycle. Do we have any public comment? No public comment from the gallery here. So next up, we will then roll straight to the superintendent's report and Dr. Mendoza.
Thank you, Board President Francisco and board members. Round Lake Area School District 116 is partnering with Mano a Mano Family Resource Center to promote the College of Lake County's adult education program, including free English classes. This partnership consists of promoting the program within our community jointly through our social media platforms and holding several sessions in which we inform parents of the program and help them complete the application for the College of Lake County. About 40 adults attended the informative session on August 8th at John T. McGee Middle School. Testing for the English class will be held on August 30th. The College of Lake County will conduct the testing and provide tutors. Classes will be held Mondays and Wednesdays at McGee, September 18th through December 6th. We hope to expand the program next spring and fall to offer classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays at Round Lake High School. The Illinois State Board of Education recently renamed the Language Learner Department to Multilingual. We recommend that we follow and rename our Language Learner Department to the Multilingual Education Department. This would in turn adjust our administrator titles from Language Learner to Multilingual Education. I just want to make sure, Board, are you comfortable with that? We're following the recommendation made by the state. Everybody, Ms. McGinley, you okay with that?
Yep.
Donations have been made to the district and schools, and in accordance with board policy, we're informing the board of these donations at this time. Thank you letters will be prepared for each donor. $18,500 to Round Lake High School Panther Crew, which is a mentoring program by the Gorder Family Foundation. $13,000 for the Web Crew, which is the middle school version of the mentor program. Again, the Gorder Family Foundation. 300 backpacks and supplies for Pleviac, the United Way of Lake County. Beach, school supplies, David's Giving Back Organization. And for your convenience, I'm sure you'll see on your calendar, we have beginning of the year, plenty of events coming up. We hope to see you there. And one late addition, I just want to reaffirm with the board that we are addressing potential heat issues this Wednesday and Thursday. We're addressing things like PE and recess, lunch. Most of our instructional spaces in the district are air conditioned. But we had a team huddle today to make sure that we were prepared for anything that's unanticipated. We're addressing athletics as well. We're going to be following IHSA guidelines. And believe it or not, we actually dusted off our remote learning handbook, so to speak, with e-learning expectations. We anticipate having a full day of school. But, given the heat and the age of some of our equipment, we may run into some things. So we actually started talking about that yesterday and Sunday. So we think we have a good plan if something happens. So that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Mendoza. Any questions for Dr. Mendoza regarding the report? Hearing none, we will move on to committee reports and a recap of the Finance Committee update.
That was my fault. I should have been quicker. I was just curious about like the after school activities for the fine arts. Since I don't know if they have guidelines. Do they? Okay.
Yeah, who wants to comment on that? It depends on, you're talking about outside. We would probably follow the same guidelines. Yes.
I was going to say marching band technically is not HSA activity, so. No, appreciate that. Sorry. Did not mean to.
Okay, yes, so finance met this evening. We had a full agenda, so as always past practice, I'll cover those items that are not on our regular board meeting agenda. I'll start with the Prevention Initiative grant funds. The state timeline has changed, which will cause us to return some grant funds. Totaling $196,000. Dr. Apgar has done a good thing, I think, in trying to use those funds that we are having to return to see how we can utilize those monies within the district so we can return less. So they have found a way to utilize those funds with equipment for the district with refrigeration and desk or equipment for within the district, taking down the $196,000 that we'll have to return to $80,000. So of course, there are positions that are funded through that. Those will still remain, though. I know nobody likes to return money. Illinois Resource Center contract. This is a contract for $42,505. It is funded through Title III grants. We'll see this at the September 11th. This is Illinois Resource Center. There is clear dates in regards to professional development. This is for, sorry, my notes are, for academic language instruction. District milk coolers. Currently, the district, we own our coolers. Dr. Kibbins has worked with Prairie Farms, who is our supplier of milk, and that they will take over the ownership of the milk coolers. This way, we do have some milk coolers, as Dr. Kibbins says, that need to go to milk cooler heaven. So we will sell those to them at a recovery cost. And then they will take over ownership of those coolers. We just need to keep them clean. They'll repair or replace as needed. We did the budget assumptions. Of course, I always ask for the board to please review those. Round Lake High School gymnasium sound system. The high school has come forward asking for the purchase or consideration of a new sound system for the gymnasium, them recognizing that that venue is used for many things within the district, choir, graduations and such. It's not part of the budget assumptions, but we're letting them vet this to see what the cost will be. They came with a estimated $100,000 cost, but there's still some questions by finance, quite a few questions. So it's still being vetted. So it's really just preliminary information letting you know they're looking into it. We don't know what final costs will be and even what the scope will actually be. But just to advise the board. Position control of a grant specialist. This is the decrease of one position, increase of another. Again, this was not, as we, talked about, as, we have like the middle school extracurricular stipends. This one was not on the budget assumptions either. We have looked at it. Again, it is a net increase of $10,000. Again, it's the decrease of one position, the increase of a grant specialist. This specialist will work with grants, not necessarily vetting new ones, as was brought up at the Finance Committee by Mr. DeVera, but working with the grants that we have now currently utilized. Of course, the EEC with the Early Childhood Initiative Grant? Prevention Initiative Grant. There are prerequisites of that position would take care of that as we work on that grant. The One to Wonder, you've heard Mr. Kozak we've talked about the cost of getting iPads as we do our refresh, 9th generation, 10th generation, and I guess maybe an 11th generation possibly. They've done a great job in vetting this. We also talked about doing a cellular enabled iPad for students. That comes with an increased cost of over $80,000, even doing freshman class of cell-enabled iPads. So they're currently vetting that. We kind of have to pull the trigger quicker on this one, like in a couple weeks, because this is going to come to the board at the next meeting on September 11th. They will be bringing forth at this time the recommendation of a cost neutral of what has been planned within the budget of what we have currently, which is the 9th generation iPad. I know Mr. Kozak is still working with T-Mobile to see maybe something can happen in 2 weeks, but we'll know when he comes forward. Did you want to add anything, Dan?
No, you've done a great job. So I just wanted to emphasize the fact that we're trying to be as responsible with the funding as we can be. We put in a budget assumption for the increase in costs in the 10th generation device, but we see no value in the 10th generation device to our kids in our program right now. So we want to recommend the 9th generation device for the third year in a row. The typical device we buy is Wi-Fi only devices. I brought forward a few times now updates with T-Mobile offering options for a cell-enabled device. We've narrowed it down as a leadership team. We think the value is to the 9th graders as a discovery, sort of a proof of concept to see what benefit our kids would have with a device that is connected both in district and out. That comes at that price point of $80,000 or more. I've asked T-Mobile if they can find a way to reduce that $82,000 and make it cost neutral, the same as if we went forward with the Wi-Fi only devices. They're working on that. Assuming you still see value in moving forward with the cell-enabled device, they're doing everything they can. And between Dr. Gibbons and I, we were bringing forward an agreement for the September 11th meeting to either go forward with a cell-enabled component or just our typical standard Wi-Fi only devices.
I just want to be clear. A cellular enabled iPad would allow kids who don't have like Wi-Fi at home, right? Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yes, it would allow kids to have coverage based on the T-Mobile footprint. So wherever there's a T-Mobile, right, strong signal, they would have coverage. I'll just point this out. So I had the opportunity to send my kids to college in Omaha last week, and I met with my counterpart in Omaha school districts. They have 51,000 students, 60,000 iPads that are all cell-enabled with T-Mobile. And that opportunity, the meeting with him gave me the opportunity to find out how well that program works. They're satisfied with the program. Just to give you that additional data point. So T-Mobile has been a good partner to them.
Yeah, I know we talked about this in previous conversations at the table. There definitely is a benefit to the students, especially our students. However, as with everything, it comes at cost and what we budgeted and what we can afford for our families. So, I mean, something can happen in 2 weeks. We never know.
As long as the board supports it, we'll continue to move forward to see if we can get that cost in line with the current budget for the regular Wi-Fi devices. So we'll continue to move forward with it. We'll bring something back in a few weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, Mr. Kozak. And it's on the informational items for the Finance Committee, and you've heard Dr. Kibbens speak to it regarding with the budget, but the 23-24 new middle school club stipends. And I know Dr. Mendoza talked to it. I know these kind of came through fast, but they captured kids' interest. And so we want to move forward with it, even though it didn't fall within the cadence that we always ask for. And I think that covers it. I know there's a lot of items on the Finance Committee agenda, but we're about to go into those with the new business.
I had a question about the grant.
The grant
The one
specialist.
that, no, the
grant
grant where the
funds.
money got returned. So is that, so sometimes you get a grant and you get awarded a grant, but you don't actually need the money because for some reason the parameters of what have happened and so on. Sometimes you return the grant because you just couldn't complete the initiative in the time allowed. What is the case for this one?
That's a very good question. The case in this situation, we received notice that we received the grant in August. There was a timeline where they held a webinar, and then they approved our budget, and then we were able to get the positions approved by the board to hire. By the time all of that took place, we were in mid-January. So the funds that we're sending back are the unused salary and benefits from August to mid-January.
Couldn't hire. It's hard to hire in the middle of the year, basically. They notified us way too late. And I think Dr. Apgar, even on the webinar, they said we expect many districts in the state will be returning money. So we're hoping their timeline is better next time.
But like I said, they still were able to utilize some of that money we have to return. So it was less money.
We had to hunt for, I get it. And we didn't have an interruption in service. There wasn't anything, the district wasn't really negatively impacted by returning the funds in terms of the delivery of service to the students as the grant intended.
That is correct. It's just the state's timeline put us behind in hiring.
Any other questions on the finance agenda? Mr. DeVera, anything to add? No questions? Okay.
Thank you very much as always for that, and I know we'll be hearing as we continue through the approvals. So we'll turn it over and start the approval process.
All right, I need a motion to approve the August 7th, 2023 regular board meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Klingler, seconded by Ms. Lee. Roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes. Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Abstain.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Ms. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the consent agenda for the accounts payable report for $1,126,727.51. Previous motions report for $208,392.49. The July 2023 Treasurers Report, the July 2023 P-Card Report, the August 21st, 2023 Employment Report.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Klingler, seconded by Mr. Tavera. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Ms. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes. Motion carries.
All right, old business. I need a motion to approve the revised school board policies as listed.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Mrs. Klingler. Any questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Ms. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the Dr. Ramirez 2023-2024 independent contract agreement in the amount of $3,000.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Ms. Lee. Roll call, please.
Can I just add?
Oh, please do, sorry.
The contract was reviewed at finance. Everything's good. Again, this is funded out of Title III grant.
Thank you, and roll call.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Ms. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the continued contract with Teaching Strategies Gold in the amount of $13,479.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Klingler, seconded by Ms. Larson.
So again, this was at Finance Committee. This is funded out of two grants. It's the preschool for all grant, $10,573. The IDEA grant covers $2,906. Again, as it states, it's the preschool for all, and everything was good with that contract.
Hearing no additional questions, roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Ms. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the proposed 3-year contract with Huddle to upgrade to the total package and add Focus Flex camera for our soccer programs in the amount of $20,500.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Francisco, seconded by Mr. Jewett.
So again, this was at finance. Huddle was used for our athletics. It's used for kids to use for recruiting. Our coaches uses it to review plays. I know most of you know. This contract is to increase and move forward prior to our expiring of the current one. the Focus Flex camera is portable, so they can take and will now be able to start streaming our away soccer games. Currently, we cannot. Currently, our athletics is streamed through NFHS. So with this new contract with Huddle, we'll let the NFHS, so many acronyms, expire, and we'll be moving to the Huddle, where we'll, most of our, within a year-ish time frame, we'll move to those athletics being streamed on YouTube.
And I know we touched on this a little bit, but are they going to set up a process for communicating that?
Yes, we did ask that question at finance, so yes, they will. So you'll see the contract, it's broken out into three costs. That first year, having the extra $500 is to cover the cost of that Focus Flex camera.
Question, so is that, so the Huddle will be eventually replacing NFHS entirely, including for football and everything else?
Oh, sorry, yes, eventually they will move to that YouTube channel and no more NFHS for streaming.
And the road, now the camera that soccer would be using for road, will football have its own for road, or?
That, I think they're still working that out. This is just the next 3 years, because we're still at least a year plus from moving away from NFHS.
Thank you. Hearing no additional questions and me not asking any additional questions, roll call please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the contract with Mad Bombers Fireworks in the amount of $8,000 for fireworks display at the high school, McGee as the launch site, on August 18th and September 29th.
So moved.
Second.
So a couple of things to address in here, because the motion has a pass date, August 18th. Today's the 21st. And then it has a future date. So I'd like to address with the board, and I did let administration know, we don't approve past, we approve future. So the high school wanted to move forward with this event, the back to school bash that I think most of us attended. They wanted to do a fireworks display. Dr. Kibbins reached out. Obviously, there wasn't enough time. So I asked if I could review the contract prior, wanting to do literally a spectacular event for the community. I reviewed it, and finance said, okay, we can move forward. Again, reiterating then and reiterating tonight at the finance committee meeting, plan, preparation, forecast, budget. It comes to us prior, not after.
Hearing no additional questions, roll call please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding between One Goal and Round Lake Area High School District 116 with an associated cost of $61,000 to be funded through the Post-Secondary Success Grant.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Mr. Tavera.
So this one again was at finance. This was directly funded through ISB that the high school used. We're seeing this now because now ISB gives us the money. We pay it through the grant to the vendor. But through this conversation at finance, came great conversation as we always kind of talk about, is those post-secondary successes for our students. So those conversations with at the finance table, they're going to bring forward to the board what those successes are with utilizing this One Goal and what the high school is doing as well. We know not every one of our students goes to college or even wants to go to college, but what what pathways, post-secondary successes are we offering and talking to our students about? So that's going to be a future agenda item, which I know I'm excited to hear about for our students, because we know not every student is the same and everyone has a different path. And how do we help our students?
Hearing no additional questions, roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Ms. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the IGA intergovernmental agreement with the Village of Brown Lake for the school resource officer position. In the amount,
Second.
in the amount of $80,000. Sorry if I wasn't quick enough on that one.
Yeah, motion by Mr. Tavera, seconded by Mrs. Klingler. Finance?
Yes, standard contract, it's the one we've seen years past. Nothing really to add. It's, we've done this contract with the Village of Round Lake and having the resource officer. It's a flat fee just to cover, obviously, the cost of the officer.
Hearing no additional questions, roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Ms. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the IGA intergovernmental agreement with the Village of Round Lake Heights. Hold on, I'm gonna. For $49,777.02.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Klingler, seconded by Mr. Tavera.
So in this one, if you review the contract, there's a difference in the contract language. If you compare the Village of Round Lake Heights to the Village of Round Lake, those differences being more for reiterations of the process for the Village of Round Lake Heights, because this is a new process for them, and kind of when to bill us, what to bill us. So it's really, that verbiage is for them, not for us, if you review or compare the two contracts.
And just as a reminder, this is technically only the second time with
Correct.
Round Lake Heights. And this is the one that basically we are funding them, adding extra people to their department.
Yes, and we still needed to really write out the process.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
No.
Ms. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the enrollment in the Pennsylvania Education Purchasing Program for Microcomputers, otherwise known as PPEM.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Tavera, seconded by Ms. Lee.
So again, this was at finance. There is no cost. That's why there was no cost listed in the motion. This is just another cooperative for us to be part of for purchasing of materials, products, goods for the district. Dr. Kibbins, again, doing our due diligence, opening up, making sure we have many viable options when we're looking for maybe high school sound systems or anything else that we're looking for.
Thank you. Hearing no additional questions, roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Ms. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the interfund transfer public hearing date to be held on Monday, September 11th at 6:55 PM.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Klingler, seconded by Ms. Lee.
Again, this was at the finance meeting. This is to set the date for the public transfer. Dr. Kivens mentioned in previous conversations, we need to start moving those monies as we start the construction project for the early education center. Making those monies available in the proper fund as we start that construction to pay those bills. Again, remembering the early education center project will be funded out of the Early Prevention Initiative grant, the Goddard Foundation, and then a commitment from the budget or from the district's budget as well.
Hearing no other questions, roll call please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the Lakeside Special Education Transportation Contract.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Lee, seconded by Mrs. Klingler.
So again, this was at finance. This is the outside busing service that we use for our students that use services outside of our district boundaries. There is a rate increase of about 9%. Again, this is a service that we need and do offer our students and families. And again, we use Lakeside. The contract is pretty static from year to year, other than obviously the cost, as just like we as a district are incurring costs in fuel, labor, they are as well.
Hearing no additional questions, roll call please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the Board of Education 2024 NSBA National School Board Conference travel and related expenses estimated at $12,896.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Mr. Tavera. Just as a clarification, this is the NSBA one for 24. COSBA's will be on our next meeting for the approval on that one. Ms. Garcia just got the info on that today, so was not able to put it together for the pre-authorization. But that one's coming up pretty soon as well. And again, as a reminder, all 7 of us are slated to go to one of the two, whether it's in Dallas or in New Orleans. Any additional questions? Finance want to chime in?
It's budgeted.
That's a beautiful sound. Roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Need a motion to approve the proposal for the addition of 3 level 3 stipends at the middle school level in the amount of $3,962.46.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Francisco, seconded by Mrs. Klingler. Finance.
Sorry, yes, this was on the agenda. As you heard Dr. Mendoza mention, kids came back. There were requests for clubs activities, which is great because we want our students to be involved and offer an array of clubs and activities for them to be involved in. So with the start of school, these have come to fruition, and we, of course, want to be able to offer those to these students.
Hearing, nope, hearing no additional questions, roll call please.
Mr. De Vera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yeah.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Miss Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Motion carries. All right, that brings us to positive occurrences. I've got some, but I'm gonna wait and see if anybody else uses up mine. Go around the table.
I guess we're starting with me. It's great to see all the students back and athletics underway. I know that varsity soccer had their home opener tonight, and I don't know the results of that yet. The back to school bash was amazing. It was so well attended by community, staff, administration. It was great. I left before the football game because I had to work early in the morning. But I did hear the fireworks from my house.
Over and over and over.
Along with the, was that gunshots? Questions, or was that fireworks?
I don't know if you guys got to see the race with the inflatable costumes, but I left my head off at that. It was awesome, and everybody was just cheering, and it was, that whole thing was fun. So, and thank you, Dr. Mendoza, for taking the bullet, and everybody else that was part of the dunk take. You're a true hero.
I'm surprised.
Gotta use the mic.
For me, a lot, definitely the Friday, the bash was cool. Something less sexy than that is actually, so I live near Round Lake Heights, or I live in Round Lake Heights near Indian Hill and the middle school. And the new construction looks fantastic. Looks really nice and clean. It's beautiful. The parking lot, all that. Yeah, that looks beautiful. So.
Out the Park District could like do that to Shagbark Park.
Yeah.
I'll continue with the back to school bash. It was the premiere of the girls flag football team. So that was great to see. And I know they had their first like tournament type thing over this past weekend and they did well. I think they won.
They won.
Yeah.
They won their first game.
So really great to see those coming forward. Again, it was well attended. The fireworks were great. It was really nice to see the stadium and the high school, with students and activities again. And then, as you mentioned, Indian Hill project, Murphy, their parking lot is done as well. Beach, the high school or beach classroom and library is complete. And with those open houses coming up for, those respective schools and all of them, I hope all of you get a chance to go see that construction work that the administration has worked hard on to get that completed in time for the start of school. I have visited all those projects and they look great. You will all be proud.
Well, going back to Friday, I just thought it was great to see the community as a whole together with all the young kids on the field and just how you guys all put it together, and it was just really awesome to just see. And it didn't matter what time you got there because I wound up there after Julie left, and it was just great to see the young ones on the field and then the little cheerleaders and just everything. It was really awesome. And the school year starting off like really well so far. Knock on wood.
All right. Next up then is future agenda items. Anyone have something they would like to have added to a future agenda?
I just said, do we wind up with the date for the visit to?
Yes. What was the date again? September 7th.
So will we get that on our calendars? Okay.
Yep.
Because that's
For
like,
the technology campus.
yes. Sorry, I can't
Yes.
think of the name, but I knew you knew what I
Yeah.
was talking
Yep.
about. Because I know some dates were proposed to us and we gave back our feedback, but I don't remember hearing a final.
No,
It's just
that
today.
that was just finalized. Basically, I will not be able to attend that one because it will be on the 7th. But that date was the best for everybody else. So.
Yeah,
You were
I've got-
both days.
I've got a question about exceptions. So so stuff comes up and we want to do something cool, like the fireworks, right? I think that's all. I think it's great, and I think we should do it because I think, but sometimes the calendar and the cadence doesn't work. Is the process to actually contact the treasurer? Is that like the stated process that we use, or is that just something that we did? Because we don't have exceptions often, but I'm curious, is there, so that exception can be made, that's cool, and then, but that it's not often, but it's also, I did what I'm supposed to do, right? And it's outside of the parameters. Typically we should do X. We couldn't do X, so we did Y. And it's actually good job of even working outside of the parameters because it's not actually in the parameters, it's in the exceptions that we decided to do.
It did. It depends what that exception is. If it needs finance approval, such as a contract, which comes to finance, then they contact me as the chair. If it's outside of that, they go to Michael as the board president. They did.
Well, but to the
Well,
point
yes and
of
no.
planning.
Yes
So
and no.
ideally
Right.
is to, yeah, I mean, well, ideally is to plan to go through the process and it happens before the event, of course. And it's better to go ahead and have the event instead of, sorry, it's outside the process, we're not gonna do it,
I
right?
agree, which is why they came to me, but it's still my job as the chair to send friendly reminders when we're not following process. There's no reason why that couldn't have come to us previously.
I think we knew it's not like the back to school bash was scheduled in 2 weeks. We knew we should have brought it
That's
forward.
why
We should have brought it ahead
Yeah,
of time.
that's why I said what I said. Well, I mean, the stipends for the 2 or the 3 middle school,
Right, for the
that's an example.
clubs.
Exception.
That's of a good exception.
And that one came to me. Dr. Mendoza gave me a phone call, explained it, and I was like, no, absolutely, we need
Right,
to.
and then they called me because it's got to come on the finance. I still want to review all that, review the budget, all that other stuff. So that was a dual. So the fireworks, again, yeah, I wasn't going to say, I shouldn't say that because I don't want anybody to think that. Because I will say no. I said yes because that was a great thing for our community and for our kids. However, I did send a friendly reminder that you guys have plenty of time to bring that.
I just want to reiterate that we do have a process for
We do.
exceptions.
Right.
And that was where, I just want to mean room for grace. That's what I was trying to do.
There's room for grace.
Small.
Just very, not a lot of.
I allow grace when grace can be allowed.
All right, I think that's going to get us off future agenda, and we've got some approval of closed session minutes.
I need a motion to approve the release of previously unreleased closed session minutes, July 2021 through December 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Klingler, seconded by Ms. Lee. Roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Ms. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the destruction of closed session audio recordings for December 2021 and prior.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Ms. Lee. Roll call, please.
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Ms. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Motion carries. And that will bring us to adjournment at 9:45 PM. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening, and we will see you at our next meeting.